In the blinding glow of his own viral live stream, Senator Adam Schiff had zero idea he was actively broadcasting his own political funeral to the entire world in real time. The atmosphere inside that packed congressional hearing room was absolutely thick with electric anticipation. You could feel the tension in the air. This wasn't some boring routine government proceeding. No, this was a calculated, meticulously orchestrated public execution, planned down to the last detail. But it wasn't designed for the dry official governmental record or some dusty congressional archive. This was built purely for the voracious appetite of a massive online audience, millions of people glued to their screens, hungry for the kind of political drama that goes mega viral in seconds. Senator Adam Schiff sat securely at the witness table, projecting the supreme confidence of a man who genuinely believed he was entirely in control of the situation. He looked untouchable. Yet he completely ignored the physical presence of Speaker Mike Johnson seated directly across the room. Instead, Schiff's unyielding gaze was magnetically locked onto his own smartphone mounted on a small black tripod right in front of him, like it was the only thing that mattered in the entire universe. That single device served as a direct portal to a staggering 1.8 million concurrent viewers who were actively watching the spectacle unfold live across X, YouTube, and his newly launched Substack channel. Schiff had effectively transformed this solemn legislative proceeding into a highly produced digital execution, complete with professional-level production value, a bold banner running beneath the live stream that dramatically proclaimed the broadcast as Senator Schiff's constitutional reckoning, live. It was pure political theater on steroids. To further amplify the theatrical humiliation, a large projection screen positioned directly behind him continuously cycled through a series of mocking preloaded graphics that his dedicated communication staff had painstakingly built the previous night. Driven by a relentless 4-second timer, the screen relentlessly flashed its visual insults like a non-stop barrage designed to break the opponent's spirit before he even spoke. First up, an image of Johnson's face plastered with the biting caption, "Not a real lawyer." Next, a crude cartoon depicting Johnson garbed as a founding father with a speech bubble declaring, "I bought this Constitution at a gas station." And finally, a deeply condescending graphic placing Johnson's cherished pocket Constitution directly next to a children's coloring book, pure mockery, delivered on repeat. Bathed in the glow of his own digital production, Schiff unleashed his verbal assault with the polished, precise cadence of a man who had rehearsed the exact delivery repeatedly in front of a mirror for hours. Pointing an accusatory finger across the vast room without ever bothering to turn his head to look at his target, Schiff coldly branded Speaker Johnson a fraud and a Christian nationalist cosplaying as a constitutional lawyer. He ruthlessly labeled the speaker a January 6th election denier, dripping with practiced condescension as he mocked Johnson for carrying a pocket constitution in the exact same manner a frightened child clutches a stuffed animal, strictly for emotional comfort rather than any genuine intellectual understanding. The insults kept coming, each one more cutting than the last. Wrapped in his bubble of digital validation, Schiff stared straight into his live stream camera, entirely unaware that the quiet man patiently absorbing this barrage of insults was about to systematically dismantle his entire political reality. The visual mockery did not stop there. The savage graphics kept cycling relentlessly every 4 seconds, hammering the humiliation deeper and deeper into the minds of everyone watching. "Let me tell the American people what a real constitutional lawyer looks like," Schiff declared, thrusting an accusatory finger across the vast hearing room without ever turning his head to face his target. His voice dripped with practiced condescension as he detailed that a true constitutional lawyer argues before the Supreme Court, clerks for federal judges, and boasts a rigorous publication record, rather than acquiring an education from a Baptist seminary and a megachurch pamphlet. Just 2 rows behind the senator, 3 of his dedicated staffers were seated, their fingers flying across keyboards in synchronized urgency. Their efforts were wildly successful. Within a mere 90 seconds of Schiff uttering his opening sentence, the hashtag #FakeConstitutionalist was already trending organically on X. The live stream's comment section became a blurred torrent of text scrolling far too rapidly for the human eye to track, filled with fervent demands to destroy him. "Adam, read him the law. End his career right now." Alongside the validating praise pouring in, "This is why we elected you." Schiff was reveling in a moment of his own meticulous design. He had personally requested this very hearing of the Joint Subcommittee on Constitutional Integrity and Executive Branch Accountability. He had orchestrated every single detail, selecting the exact date, approving the witness list, and aggressively negotiating the highly unusual arrangement that seated him at the witness table rather than with the panel. His staff had proudly pitched it to him as occupying the prosecutor's chair. He walked in thinking this was going to be his crowning victory. Supreme confidence radiated from him like never before. Just 2 weeks prior, he had confidently informed his communications director that this specific hearing would dictate the trajectory of American constitutional discourse for the next decade and would permanently end Speaker Johnson's career. She had dutifully documented both of those grand predictions in her planner, words that still remained written on the page, now looking like the most ironic prophecy in political history. Yet across the tense expanse of the room, sitting on the panel side in the second chair from the left, Speaker Mike Johnson remained an image of absolute unnerving stillness. He wore a somewhat rumpled charcoal gray suit that appeared to have been pressed exactly one time in its existence. Arrayed before him on the polished table were merely 3 simple but powerful items: a heavily weathered pocket constitution, its pages visibly dog-eared and its margins filled with notes penned in 2 distinct colors of ink, a tarnished silver pocket watch that had long ago ceased to display the time for any particular decade, and a solitary dark navy folder bearing a handwritten white label that read simply, Schiff versus Constitution, Case File. A detail quickly captured by the flashing lens of an Associated Press reporter seated in the front row. Throughout Schiff's entire theatrical opening, Johnson offered absolutely zero reaction. He did not raise his eyes. He did not reach out to adjust his microphone. Instead, with deliberate calm, he opened his weathered pocket constitution to a previously bookmarked page, calmly withdrew a blue pen from his interior jacket pocket, and added a tiny precise notation into the margin, completely unfazed. Schiff, pressing his perceived advantage, escalated his rhetoric even further. He labeled Johnson the worst kind of fraud, not an obvious one, but a dangerous entity who had somehow persuaded half the nation that an evening law degree from LSU rivaled the lifetime achievements of genuine constitutional scholars. Schiff's voice boomed with theatrical indignation as he accused Johnson of marching onto the House floor, waving his constitution like a street preacher wielding a Bible, loudly, performatively, yet never once actually opening it to a page that might prove inconvenient to his agenda. Briefly pausing his diatribe, Schiff meticulously adjusted his smartphone on its tripod, ensuring the lens captured his profile from a more flattering angle, a specific framing he and his staff had rehearsed the previous evening in his Senate office. Pleased that the ambient lighting in the hearing room was surpassing their expectations, Schiff leaned in for what he thought was the kill. "So today I am going to do the American people a service," he proclaimed, vowing to expose on his live stream right in this very room before the committee the truth that Speaker Johnson had spent an entire career concealing, that he was not a constitutional lawyer but rather a costume. Schiff allowed a pregnant, heavily rehearsed pause to hang in the air before demanding an answer on the record. Was Johnson a constitutional lawyer, or a fraud merely pretending to be one? As he spoke, the live stream's viewer counter triumphantly surged past 1.85 million. Behind him, one of his 3 staffers snapped a quick photograph of the massive viewer count, eagerly posting it to his personal X account with the caption, "Here we go." That specific post would rapidly amass 19,000 likes in its initial 10 minutes, only to abruptly and permanently stop. Then the tide turned. Johnson slowly closed his pocket constitution, making no effort to stand or even straighten his posture in his chair. He finally lifted his gaze, completely bypassing Schiff, to look directly into the primary C-SPAN broadcast camera securely mounted on the press riser at the back of the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was so startlingly soft that the Senate sound engineer, stationed in the control booth 3 floors above, had to physically lean forward over his console to desperately check the input audio level. "Senator, I'm happy to answer that question. But before I do, may I ask you one thing?" Schiff allowed a smug, self-satisfied smile to spread across his face, the distinct expression of a man wholly convinced he maintained absolute dominance over the room. He generously invited Johnson to take all the time he needed. Johnson reached out, deliberately opened the dark navy folder, and asked in a mild but penetrating tone that sliced through the silence, "Senator Schiff, when was the last time you read the 4th Amendment?" The sprawling hearing room plunged into an immediate suffocating silence. The sound engineer's audio levels instantly flatlined to 0. In the front row, a Wall Street Journal reporter froze, his fingers hovering motionless over his keyboard mid-sentence. Schiff's confident smile managed to hold for exactly 3 seconds before it visibly flickered and died on his lips. He would spend the ensuing 4 hours desperately attempting to conjure that smile back, and he would completely fail. Refusing to wait for Schiff to stammer out a reply, Johnson rose to his feet, gripping his pocket constitution without elevating his volume or theatrically clearing his throat. He simply turned to his bookmarked page and began to read aloud with steady reverence. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Closing the small booklet, he noted it was a mere 27 words, a passage he read most mornings, not as a prop, but as a stark reminder of the immense burden it placed upon the people occupying that very room. Then the real demolition began. Johnson meticulously withdrew 4 separate documents from the Navy folder, each bearing a glaring red declassification stamp, and arranged them in a pristine row upon the table. Beside them, he gently placed a 5th, slightly thinner document adorned with a distinct seal. He methodically explained to the now silent room that the first 4 documents were the publicly available declassified 2020 FISA applications utilized to surveil Carter Page, while the 5th was the minority memo authored by Schiff himself in February 2018. Tapping the minority memo with quiet intensity, Johnson quoted it verbatim, highlighting Schiff's assertion that FBI and DOJ officials had neither abused the FISA process, omitted material information, nor subverted the tool to spy on the Trump campaign. When pressed if this was indeed his memo, Schiff aggressively leaned into his microphone, his voice edged with sudden defensive annoyance, attempting to dismiss the inquiry as ancient history. Undeterred, Johnson politely thanked him for the confirmation and immediately reached back into his folder. From the depths of the file, he produced a slender stack of printed emails, Schiff's own secret internal emails, and began reading them one by one with chilling calmness. The first email, a January 29, 2018 communication from Schiff's senior staff counsel warning that the unredacted FISA materials contained at least 11 factual inaccuracies. Nunes is not wrong about the omissions. How do we respond? The second, Schiff's own reply the very next day, we don't respond to the substance, we respond to the intent. Frame Nunes as partisan and the details become noise. The third and fourth emails showed the cold calculation, warnings about the Inspector General's review, and Schiff's response that by the time Horowitz reports, the news cycle will have moved. We just need to win this week. Boom. The live stream chat froze in collective shock. Viewer numbers began a catastrophic hemorrhage. Johnson continued relentlessly, exposing every contradiction with the Horowitz report that found 17 significant inaccuracies, all on Schiff's side. He dismantled Schiff's integrity piece by piece, proving this wasn't mere political disagreement, it was a profound constitutional injury. On the digital front, the viewer counter plummeted from 1.85 million down to 1.52 million and kept falling. Panic rippled through the comments as people demanded fact checks. But Johnson wasn't done. He closed the FISA folder and retrieved a second, significantly thicker folder labeled Property Records MISA State of Maryland. He pivoted to the Fifth Amendment and methodically detailed how Schiff had certified a Maryland mansion as his primary residence while simultaneously claiming a California condo for tax breaks, refinancing the Maryland property 5 times under false statements. A federal grand jury was already investigating for wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, and more. Schiff's lawyer was now whispering frantically. Schiff had no strength left to wave him off. Then came the darkest chapter of all, the Ed Buck donor scandal. Johnson laid out the public record, over $500,000 in donations, 2 young black men dead in Buck's apartment, and 17 agonizing months where grieving families and journalists begged Schiff for help, only to be met with cold, calculated silence because silence is the lower risk posture. The moral weight of it all hung heavy in the room. Schiff's breathing became heavy and ragged, audible through his own open microphone. Johnson smoothly pivoted to the First Amendment and read Schiff's own damning 2019 email. The base doesn't want us to be right. They want us to fight. He let those toxic words echo, explaining how this philosophy represented the death of true representation. By now, Schiff was completely broken. He sat speechless, staring blankly at his hands. A 17-year-old Senate page quietly refilled his water glass right beside him for nearly 30 seconds, and Schiff never even noticed. That single agonizing defeated breath, now dubbed the Schiff sigh, would be viewed over 31 million times in just days. Johnson stood tall and delivered the final inescapable mirror. Senator, you asked if I was a fraud. Now I ask you the same question. Are you? He gathered his weathered pocket constitution and his father's old pocket watch, walked confidently down the center aisle, and exited the room without once looking back, leaving absolute devastation in his wake. Schiff's once proud livestream whimpered to a close with a measly 89,000 viewers. In the days and weeks that followed, the consequences were swift and brutal. Grand juries expanded, ethics committees launched probes, book deals were canceled, speaking contracts terminated, and even his own party began treating him like a ghost. The hunter had finally become the hunted. The documents Speaker Johnson read were just the tip of the iceberg. Those newly unsealed server logs from his chief of staff's hidden accounts still hold answers to questions no one in Washington dares to ask out loud. This was one of the most brutal, most complete, and most viral political takedowns in modern American history. What do you think happens next? Will more explosive emails drop? Will Schiff resign? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe right now. The next episode on those hidden server logs is going to be even more nuclear.